Nation, what is up, everybody? Welcome here to Pop Culture Philosophers. I am Rockin Robbie Billups, and tonight it's a very special show yet again because we are joined by one of my favorite creators, one of my favorite people in this industry, and we're also joined by one of my least favorite people, but it's the Brianiac. What's up, Brian?
Station Robbie. I'm glad I have a distinction in some ranking or other. You know, I appreciate that.
No, you're good, man. I'm just messing with you, man. I love you, Brian. How are you doing, bro?
I'm doing good. I'm making it in these ridiculous times.
Yeah, you know? Real quick, I just want you to know. I just want you to know that once again, me and J Strick had the discussion today about how valid over hard eggs were on a menu because he finally saw over hard eggs on a menu and he was like, "What a weird stretch." I was like, "No, it's a real thing. Most people don't get it, but Brian does." Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. I totally get it. Yeah. I'm glad he saw that, but if he's still rejecting it, you know, I don't know what's going to get through. You know, I don't know.
Right. All right. Well,
let's try something else.
Yeah, right. It's been a while since we've had a creator conversation, and so we wanted to bring this homie back on because he's a fantastic person. We've had him on the show before, and I'm really excited to get back and catch up and talk about the newest bit of the career of this gentleman, right? So this is the writer of Spencer and Locke 1 and 2. This is the writer of Going to the Chapel. This is the writer of Scout's Honor, right? Which is the Aftershock book that everybody loved this year. I thought it was amazing. And it's also the writer of the OZ, which we talked with last year when we launched issue number 1. And now we got issue number 2 of this book, the OZ, coming out. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, and gender resistors, throw out your stations most heartedly for the one, the only, David Pepose!
Hey! Thank you guys so much for having me. What a wonderful introduction. Robbie, you are one of my favorite people in the industry as well. Aww. And thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for having me back on the show. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about my new Kickstarter, the return of the OZ. And so, yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for it, man. First of all, David, how you been? How's Ruby?
She's good. I took a rare afternoon nap today. I've been hitting the interview circuit pretty hard, and instead of moving Ruby, my girlfriend apparently took photos of Ruby sitting on my face while I was trying to sleep. So, you know, dogs, you know, no boundaries. But she's otherwise she's doing great. She's almost a year old, and just happy to be a part of the family.
Right. Ruby, your dog, by the way, is incredibly fucking cute and adorable, and I appreciate every social media update that we get.
She's a terrible writer's assistant, I found, so I'm trying to put her to work as a marketing assistant.
You got to
find an opportunity for growth.
You got to find what they're good at, right? You know. Yeah. So there you go. And I do want to say that I have fulfilled a bit of a promise since the last time we were on here. I said, because we asked you what licensed properties you'd like to work on. You mentioned a few. And I was like, well, you know, you just mentioned one where I want to start the toy collection. And look, I finally got it.
Oh, that's great.
I got my Captain. Look, it still works. What is that?
That's dope.
Oh, my goodness.
I hope you turn that somehow into like a voodoo doll so I can start like writing Captain Planet.
So, do I got to like somehow write your script in its hand? Like,
rather than stabbing the doll, you have to put a pen in its hand and start writing the script. I've been saying for a long time, Captain Planet is a licensed property that I would love to write, in part because no one else wants to. I don't know who actually has the rights to it. I don't know if it's a DC sort of umbrella under the Warner Brothers thing, or if it's something that IDW or Boom might be able to get their hands on. But I figure if I say it in every interview, somebody will listen, and maybe somebody will think of me if they get the rights to it.
I'm just going to keep throwing this out there. Who does have the rights? Let's go ahead and get David on board, because me and Brian last year we heard a little bit about the excitement of your Captain Planet idea. However, and we're still waiting for Colonel Earth to show up if nobody picks up on this. But let's talk about the OZ. So last time you were here, we talked about the OZ. You were kickstarting issue number 1. It was successfully funded. It was
Yeah.
like really crazy. I got the Mon House cover that you colored, right?
Yeah, I did the colors on that one.
Very well placed colors. I thought Dave Stewart did this, man.
Cool.
Oh, thank you.
This book is amazing. It's kind of like the Hurt Locker meets Mad Max meets the Wizard of Oz. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
Like, it's fantastic. And now you are here for book 2 out of 3.
Yep.
Tell us about it. Tell us what's going on. And by the way, like, you know how Kickstarter is always like, well, we, you know, just so you know, you only, if it's funded, it will happen. This is already funded yet again.
Yeah.
You are exceeding where you're killing it, bro, with this
40
book.
minutes?
We funded in 40 minutes this time, which is actually less than half of how long it took the last Kickstarter, which was already kind of surreal how fast it funded. Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with the OZ. It's what if Mad Max took place in the Wizard of Oz? It's the story of Dorothy Gale's granddaughter, who's a disillusioned Iraq War veteran who finds herself stranded in the war-torn land of Oz. As she discovers her grandmother killing 2 wicked witches and then clicking her heels together and splitting, left Oz in a power vacuum not unlike Baghdad, that plunged the country into decades of brutal civil war. And now this new Dorothy will have to navigate her grandmother's former friends, the Tin Soldier, the Scarecrow, and the Prince of Lions, if she hopes to survive the horrors of the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ. And yeah, we're so thrilled to be coming back. It's been a long time coming. We launched this new Kickstarter almost a year to the day that we launched our previous Kickstarter. And, there were a lot of reasons for that. One was we wanted to make sure that we had a good critical mass of pages, that artist Ruben Rojas and color Sweetie Kogar didn't feel like they had to cut any corners. But also, I had a book come out through Aftershock called Scout's Honor, came out earlier in the year. It quickly started getting even more traction than I expected. And so we wanted to make sure we didn't have 2 books coming out that were competing for attention. And, also just pragmatically, Ruben Rojas, our artist, he lives in Spain. It was a COVID hotspot. And so there were some delays in production just related to that. And so, that's the great thing about working on Kickstarter. We're not beholden to the monthly schedule. And so readers understand that we're taking the time to make sure that we get this thing done right. And I'm so thrilled with what we have in store for all of our readers. Our first issue, we had to do a lot of exposition. We had to introduce Dorothy, kind of get into her headspace of what it was like coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan, and how did the magical land of Oz transform into the war-torn occupied zone. But now we've had our vegetables, and now with our second issue, it frees us to really put the pedal to the metal and really floor it in a big way. We get to explore some brand new territories of the occupied zone. And we get to introduce some characters that I've been really excited to introduce for a long time, particularly the Prince of Lions, Jack Pumpkinhead. Seeing how they kind of complete Dorothy's special forces in a way, and both kind of help and complicate Dorothy's journey. It's really fun. If you like games like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VII, you'll love kind of this band of archetypes that we're putting together. As Dorothy becomes the reluctant leader of the resistance and embarks on a dangerous quest for the all-powerful silver slippers before the Scarecrow can use them to invade our world. So lots of fun stuff going on with this one. It's bigger and badder than our first issue. And I can't wait for people to see it. I think they're going to realize once they see our story, it was definitely worth the wait.
Hell yeah. I threw a link to the Kickstarter in the description below. There's also a link I shared in the PCP Army, the official Pop Culture Philosophers Facebook group. But since we last chatted, David, me and Brian have both had the chance, obviously, to back the book. We got it.
Thank you.
And now we've read it. And I'll tell you what, first of all, this is basically 2 comics in one.
Yes.
Right? Like this is 2 full-size comics in one. It is well worth it. You can get this on the new Kickstarter. This book's freaking awesome. And you told us last time that you were like, maybe I took some liberties with one character, but I think it works. And I'm pretty sure you were talking about the Scarecrow, bro. That when I read this, that broke my fucking heart, bro. Okay.
Just wait. The Scarecrow, I think, is my favorite villain I've ever written. And we sort of saw him almost secondhand in the first issue. This issue, we get to see a little bit more of him. You know, kind of we see firsthand how the occupied zone has kind of corrupted him and twisted him, because he was the guy with all the ideas, but even the smartest guy in Oz couldn't keep all the plates spinning. So he comes by his corruption, honestly. And so we'll see a little bit more of that in issue 2. And then issue 3 especially will really get into his head. And he's definitely, you know, it's heartbreaking. The idea that somebody who used to be so fundamentally good would kind of, you know, he would compromise in his values enough that it would just make the whole house of cards collapse.
But it makes sense, right? Because it's about, like, he based his identity on the idea that now he is the one with the brain. He's got the brain now. He should know how to do it. It gave me vibes of Idiocracy, when the president's like whatever Comanche Mountain Dew, whatever the hell it is, you know, and he's like, electrolytes, like, you know, like, bro, I just got this brain. I don't know what the hell to do with it. Like, it's such a cool idea.
Yeah, it's, you know, he's got all the brains, but none of the heart. And you know, you need both to really be an effective leader. You need the brains, the heart, and the courage. And Dorothy, she might be capable of having all three.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the points of the originals, at least the movie story. I still have yet to read all 29,000 books or whatever. Brian has read this book. Brian, what'd you think of it? What do you think? What do you want to ask David, bro?
Let's see. I went actually and listened to the writer's commentary. And so it's not really a question, but I guess you brought up that you started off with, that you, for a while, you were a journalist, interviewing veterans and everything. And I thought that was, I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, because I mean, obviously that's great experience working on this topic specifically, you know?
Yeah. It was one of those things. And I feel like this affects a lot of my writing, is that you never know what your past experiences are going to help inform later on. My first job out of school, I was a newspaper reporter, and I worked in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, which is kind of an area that has, like, it's the Northeast sort of summer homes next to, like, crushing poverty of the 12-month a year locals, sometimes within a couple of blocks of each other. And this was during the height of the recession. It was early 2009. And one of the beats that I had, I covered crime, I covered state politics, and then I had sort of a number of sort of mini beats that as stories would come up, I would cover them. And the local military beat was one of them. And so I did a number of interviews, talking with veterans coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan. And what was it like for them to reintegrate back into domestic society? And it really struck me, some of the interviews, just hearing people's different coping mechanisms. I remember there was one guy who was telling me that he was like, I went to the local pool and I would just I would hold my breath and I would just curl up into a ball and I would just kind of sit under the water as long as I could, because that was sort of that's where I felt most safe and most quiet, But hearing about just sort of the degree of sort of alienation and isolation that a lot of people felt coming back, part of it is it's hard to convey what it's like being overseas to somebody who hasn't been. And just, overseas, there's the hyper vigilance, and sort of the rigid structure of being over there, on top of dealing with things like traumatic brain injury and PTSD. And then you come back here and, it's loud, it's noisy. There's very little rules. There's very little structure. There's very little support. Our society is all about throwing you in the deep end of the pool and, hoping you swim.
Yeah. Self-determination.
And, that was, all these stories really kind of stood out to me. And it was years later, but I wound up incorporating a lot of them here in the OZ. I think also, a big thing that I always try to do, especially because like trauma always, I'm always drawn to that, in my storytelling. I think the guiding principle for me is, how do I treat my characters with compassion and dignity and respect? Because I found, especially for my first book, Spencer and Locke, when you do that for your characters, you're really doing that for your readers, And that, I think, kind of helps bridge that gap if something is not your direct lived experience, because, if you treat the characters with compassion, that means you're always sort of erring on the side of caution. You're not treating them as a punchline. And I think readers respect that. We've had a lot of veterans actually reach out about this book, saying that it really spoke to them, that's honestly the best review I could ask for on this kind of book. You saw even in our first issue, we have a 9-panel grid of just what happens to Dorothy just day to day, and so, at one point, Grandma knocks over, her breakfast, and you see this look on Dorothy's face because just the shattering of that plate was enough to jar her for a minute. And sort of the rapid mood swings that come, she just punched out like a mirror for basically no reason. And down to sort of self-medicating with alcohol, and how that's not even really enough for her. So these are all things that really I was told directly from people who lived it, and so it made the process, in certain ways, almost disquietingly easy to write, because I sort of had all those interviews still kind of ringing in my head over a decade later.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. 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 And also learned in the commentary that
thank you for listening.
Your dad was in there. Oh man, it was great. Are you doing that for this one too, or
we will probably have some sort of stretch goal or a social stretch goal with that in mind. So yeah, keep backing and sharing the campaign, and I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happened for part 2.
Yeah, because I found out a lot of cool things, and I did feel dumb. I didn't catch a couple things that you were pointing out, but that's normal. But yeah. But in there also, you mentioned that your dad was drawn in there as one of the one of the characters. I thought that was great.
Yeah, he was one of the Munchkin guards that Dorothy punches out. That was, it's funny how that happened. I probably didn't even mention it in the director's or in the writer's commentary. But so my aunt purchased one of the drawn cameo tiers last time, and she asked to put my dad in the mix. And what happened was I emailed Ruben and I sent him all the photos of the people who would ask for cameos. And I was like, okay, tell me where you can fit these in. I guess I didn't convey to him that my dad was one of these people. And so he's like, oh, okay, here they are. And I'm like, you just got my dad punched in the book. So my aunt thought that was hilarious. And I was just very apologetic to my poor father. But yeah, somehow I don't think he's going to be electing for any more cameos in my books as a result.
Yeah. I did notice that he got punched out, and I was kind of like, huh, that's an interesting choice.
No, it's not, because I love my father, and it was not planned that way. But I blame Ruben 100% for that one.
There you go.
That's freaking hilarious, man. I think that's great. Yeah, here's something too. A lot of it was influenced by what you had, heard from soldiers, and I've known soldiers who have gone over, especially into Iraq and Afghanistan, and I have a friend who just got an apartment near a new baseball stadium, and every weekend they do fireworks. And he was like, I wish I would have known about that, because even just like that, people don't even think about that. Like the 4th of July is not just trauma for dogs. It's this is a thing. Like it's kind of a, we need to start thinking about this kind of, we gotta think about this. Right. And I love how you portrayed the character in the OZ, because I felt like that was real. Like that was based on something, and it's probably even more prevalent and necessary to we just heard all this crazy ass news from Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
This is even more and that's why it's sad to say, we talked a lot about evergreen properties. It's sad to say that war stories are supremely evergreen, because that's just every generation has that.
I think we are sort of we're turning a corner, in sort of, really kind of the modern state of war in my lifetime. The U.S. has always been involved in something in the Middle East, whether we're talking about sort of Desert Storm and sort of my early youth to, the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan when I was in high school, all the way to today, and I think we are turning a corner in that regard. I think, in certain ways, this is, it is kind of a repeat of Vietnam in that way. And I think We've seen movies like The Hurt Locker or Jarhead or American Sniper, and I think those are going to have a very different tenor very soon. And it's one that, to be honest, I didn't expect. Obviously, if I was Nostradamus, I'd be probably doing something more lucrative than comics. But I feel like it's something that even I couldn't have expected. And the way we've been marketing the book, we've been trying to be as sort of respectful as we can about it. Because we're not trying to sort of make light of real world situations. Sure. But I am very curious, how is this whole series going to look different in the next couple of years? And I wish I could say for sure. But the one thing that we do have in this book that I think kind of helps make it a little more evergreen is, we do deal with sort of real world phenomenons of, PTSD and trauma and depression and, sort of the soldier's journey coming back home. But we also, straddle that line of kind of the more sort of high flying sort of pulp sense of war, like a Star Wars. There is sort of this good versus evil arc that we have here. And obviously, sort of the fantasy elements make this feel a little bit more larger than life. I'm not Greg Rucka, where Greg, you can feel every little bit of military detail. He's been writing this for 20 years, maybe more. I don't go quite to that level of granularity, in part because I'm not as talented as Greg Rucka. But I feel
that's
like
debatable, David. Come on,
we're able to sort of have our cake and eat it too.
I just want to let you know this: we've had you on the show more than Greg Rucka. So whatever that says to you.
Well, yeah,
very true.
Yeah, that is something that I have over Greg Rucka.
And it's worth something.
He's got the movies and the TV deals, so it all balances out.
We're not trying to paint the idea that this is a very depressing or super the book has that in there, but it's still a fantasy fun kind of book.
Yeah, I think if anybody's read my work, the OZ, it's in keeping with books like Spencer and Locke and Scout's Honor, and that we start with dark material, but it's always about kind of the redemptive climb out of it. And so I think that really forms a really nice contrast where you have sort of a very dark setting, but there's this core of hope to it that we keep kind of excavating as the series progresses. And I think that's what keeps the book from feeling, it's engaging without being oppressive. It's not going to leave readers feeling like, oh boy, I need a shower after this. I think readers feel inspired and even optimistic seeing these characters, because if you see somebody who's endured the things that Dorothy or Detective Locke or even Kit have endured, and then they're still able to, if not conquer their personal demons, live with them, then what's to say that we can't do the same?
That tinge of hope is important too, because the idea it's like we have this I don't know what it is, but it's almost like a soldiers memorial thing here in our local town. Yeah. And it's like a POW thing. And it's just like, it's a memorial to all the people that from our area that have died in wars and shit. Right. Yeah. And it has this timeline of all the wars that America has been involved in, right? Whether they're official or not. Right. And it has this line that goes through every single conflict. And at the end of the line, it has the number of casualties, U.S. casualties, right? And I remember going there for the first time years ago and being like, this is really weighing me down, because literally the line started before the formation of our nation, right? And it never stops.
Yeah, the number is staggering, thing, right? It's a staggering number. And I think it's easy for people, especially if you haven't served, and it's easy to see it as a statistic. And I think that's something that I really like about the OZ is we're able to put a face. You can't hand wave away a character with a beating heart and and a real sense of emotion and sort of an inner life. And if it gets people kind of thinking about sort of the enormity of war and what we're asking soldiers to do, on our behalf. And sort of the ethics and the morality that soldiers grapple with every single day, and just the struggles that they deal with. I think if our book gets people acknowledging that even a little bit, then I think it's an overwhelming success.
I also like how you kind of take this idea and you throw it into what would happen in Oz, right? You're like, I mean, when you first pitched it to us, you were like, so Dorothy just shows up, kills 2 leaders of the country and leaves. Like what the hell is that all about? Like what happens afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that we're thinking about right now, especially with this Afghanistan stuff. Like and it's like, there's the war machine, there's the divisiveness, there's the hatred, but there's the hope that this will end it. And then sometimes you're like, oh, that wasn't enough. But the idea that what happens is that this new iteration of Dorothy has to come in and kind of like rectify that or evolve that forward, right? That's really cool. And how you took the way that all those main characters, the Tin Soldier, the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion, right? The Prince of Lions, right? Yeah. Like the way that you throw that out as to where it picks up from there. I don't think many other people have thought much about that. And it was so freaking clever to me, bro.
Thank you.
It's so good.
Well, honestly, I mean, the thing that I always try to do, I was saying this in another interview earlier, was that, the general populace doesn't get to see like 95% of the ideas I come up with because they're bad. I generally am always trying to figure out like what's the Hawaiian pizza that I can come up with, what's the chocolate and peanut butter, what's the peanut butter and jelly. But that means you go through a lot of like horrible combinations that should not see the light of day. Yeah. What makes my mashups, I think the thing I'm always seeking is, okay, is there a theme that feels inherent to the premise? And so by that, I mean, when I came up with the OZ, it was, I had wanted to do fantasy. And so I'd written down a bunch of fantasies, inspirations that I liked, Piers Anthony, Lloyd Alexander, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. And then when I wrote Wizard of Oz, my cursor stuck in Google Docs. And as I was waiting for it to unfreeze, it was on the word Oz. And I thought to myself, that's a short word. Like, what if that was an acronym for something? And when I thought occupied zone, it's like the whole premise just like hit me like a lightning bolt. I was like, oh, it's not just a fantasy story, it's a war story. Because it's like it is baked into the text, just like Spencer and Locke, which is what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City, said, hey, if Calvin had to so vividly hallucinate his own best friend, maybe that's not like a charming quirk. Maybe that's a symptom of a darker pathology of like of an abusive upbringing. With the Wizard of Oz, it's just, two of, like you killed 2 wicked witches and then you convince the Wizard of Oz to leave and then you split like instantly. Yeah. Like, that of course that like we've seen it happen. I saw it in my lifetime.
It sounds like some U.S. foreign policy. I'm just going to say.
Exactly that. And so, beyond that, it was maybe disarmingly, maybe disquietingly easy to extrapolate based off of that. Dorothy as sort of a haunted veteran, the image of her kind of giving us this 1,000-yard stare while she's sort of taking a break in the battlefield, to the Tin Soldier being kind of this literal living war machine. He's been destroyed and rebuilt with whatever scrap is around him. And what that metaphor might mean for people who are injured and killed in action. The Prince of Lions is one of my favorite characters in the book because he represents sort of, there's, that calculus of courage when you're just fighting for yourself. But how does that change when you're wearing a crown, when you're the leader of a whole country, and you're not just fighting for yourself, but you're fighting for millions of other people? How does that equation change? Down to the Scarecrow, which is, what happens? He's sort of the critic turned pro in a lot of ways, and he can't hack it. He's the big idea man who has quickly and crushingly realized that like big ideas aren't going to save you. And sort of how does that twist him? How does that warp his morality and whatever kind of goodness that he had in his heart? And you know, down to sort of, you know, other characters like Toto, who if you liked what we did in Toto in issue 1, you're gonna love issue 2. He's got a big damn hero moment that is, I think, my favorite part of issue 2. And Jack Pumpkinhead, who you know, he's sort of the X factor in the book. You know, he's going to be a real thorn in Dorothy's side for a good chunk of this for this second issue. He's kind of like the taskmaster of the Scarecrow's army. You know, he's a blue collar mercenary who with a kind of a dry sense of humor and a gift for killing. And you know, what happens when this sort of the OZ's ultimate aerial fighter goes head to head with you know, the warlord of Oz, Dorothy Gale herself. So, you know, lots of cool, fun stuff. Like I said, we've had our vegetables. We've done all of our exposition. And now we really get to watch Dorothy and the Tin Soldier not just sort of grow their forces, but really watch them put themselves through their paces.
It's time for the meat and potatoes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And yes, everybody, hashtag Toto lives. And
yes.
Yeah, you didn't make, you know, you made me so proud when that happened. You know, I lost one of my pet children earlier this year. It crushed me. And so I feel that. I was like, yes, Toto lives, god damn it.
That's what happened with me as well.
With Holly,
you know,
right?
Yeah. Holly was our Cairn Terrier, a little Toto dog. And we had taken her from my parents shortly after Spencer and Locke came out. And so I was writing these pages right around when we brought Holly home with us, and I got the artwork shortly after she passed away. She had melanoma for her last year. We took her radiation for almost a year, and she passed just before everything shut down with the pandemic. And when we got the diagnosis, I immediately rewrote Toto's entire arc.
Oh wow!
I said, you know, there are things I can't control in the real world, but I can control this. And so, yeah, we went from Toto kind of having I think a shorter role in this book to having he's just a very fun character. You know, he's the guy who he delivers exposition in kind of like the funniest and most absurd way. And I think he's a big reminder that, like, you know, just because you're, you know, it is the war-torn land of Oz, it's still the land of Oz. There is a degree of whimsy and absurdity that, like, you can't escape. And so having this like tiny little terrier, like, you know, delivering exposition speeches and being like, well, this is what happened when I led the resistance for 20 years. That's like hilarious to me.
That's awesome. Like Toto's, you're like Gandalf, man. It's awesome.
Yes. That is a perfect sort of representation of the voice I had in mind for Toto. And you can see even like in our preview, like he's got little spectacles now, you know, little dog glasses. And yeah, he's just a very fun character. And Ruben just draws the absolute hell out of him. And so, yeah, if you're a fan of Toto, you buy this issue. I promise you it will be 100% worth the price of admittance.
Yeah. And it was a emotionally heavy scene when they met, and then that ended too. So it wasn't, you know, I thought that was great.
Thank you.
You know, turn at the end there.
Yeah.
And everything. It was really touching. That was really cool. So
thank you.
So I got the Kickstarter right here, David. Why don't you run us through the new Kickstarter? What's going on? And look, the numbers changing before my eyes. You're like,
that's fantastic.
Crazy. Over 600 backers. You still got 26 days to go. This is insane. Tell us what's going on with it, bro.
Well, yeah, we are creeping closer and closer to 400% funded. We are, I think, looking at my dashboard, we are 397% funded, and this is only day 4. I am so blown away and so thrilled. But yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the OZ, this is the perfect time to get on board and join our Emerald Army. We've got catch-up tiers, both print and digital, so we can get you up to speed. And we also have things for collectors as well. We have 4 covers for this issue, and so we've got a bundled set where you can get all 4 covers for the price of 3. If you're a diehard collector who missed our last campaign, we also have all 9 covers that we've put out for issues 1 and 2. I believe for the price of 7, or 7.5. And then, you know, we've also got bundles with all of my other trade paperbacks if you're interested in those. We'll also have a backer kit store at the end of the campaign. So if you want to buy any of these things a la carte, you you're welcome to add them onto your purchase when we collect your shipping address. Down to some really fun kind of ultra exclusive tiers. We've got some limited edition commissions, original commissions from Ruben Rojas. We have a chance to get drawn into the book. We have Skype sessions with me if you want to talk about writing comics or running a Kickstarter or doing publicity or navigating Hollywood. You can set the agenda. Down to the really ultra exclusive tiers. We have 2 limited edition handcrafted Spencer and Locke plushies. We had some made for my creative team, and we happen to have a couple left over. As well as you can only get this on Kickstarter. I'm so thrilled. A complete set of 14 Ranger Scout merit badges from Scouts Honor. For those keeping score, only 7 have been released to the general populace right now. That have been sort of sent to various comic book shops if they hit a certain order minimum. This is a chance to get all 14. And that I don't think you will be able to do for a long time, if ever. I think there were some badges that they gave out at Comics Pro Summit, some that I think are saving for cons. I think there might even be one badge that just might be exclusive to Aftershock staffers. So we have 2 more sets left out of my personal collection. So we are offering those as well. If you're a retailer, we have a special 50% off retailer discount to get 10 copies of any covers you want from issues 1 and 2. But yeah, we're trying to meet our readers where they're at, both in terms of offering accessibility and getting people up to speed, but also financially. If you throw down $10, you get the OZ number 2, you get the PDF of that. You get the first issue of Spencer and Locke, number 1. The first issue of Going to the Chapel, number 1. You get PDFs of all 3 of those. That's 88 pages of story just from me. We are creeping closer and closer to our first stretch goal, which is a digital comics extravaganza, which that is an extra 200 plus pages of story from just a murderer's row of creative talent. We've got people like Justin Jordan, Ryland Grant, Clay Adams, Kat Kalamia, Eric Palicki involved, just to name a few. So that's already, you're getting 300 pages of content just for $10. And that's, the more you throw in, the more we're giving back. And we've got a ton of really cool stretch goal ideas in mind. That's really, I think, one of the bigger differences from our last campaign is I never anticipated that we would fund on the first day. And so stretch goals was, just about as likely as me walking on the moon. So when we funded in 2 hours, I spent another 30 days playing catch up and figuring out how do we add value, how do we offer our readers more and more in a way that's not going to blow up our production timeline, that's not going to blow up our shipping budget, that people will find to be, a true enhancement of the work. And now I've had the year to really plan for success as well as plan for failure. And so, if you like, say, our Winged Monkey enamel pins, which we will have available again on the Backer Kit store, you may want to back and share the campaign because we might have another cool thing in that vein. Same thing with our stickers and our prints. If you like the theme song "Heart of Tin" by the band Bed Death, you might want to like and share because we might have something else in that vein. We've got some really fun stuff waiting in the wings, and I think our Yellow Brick Road Warriors are going to be more than equal to the challenge.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And everybody, once again, that description, in the description below is a link. I threw it in the PCP Army. This is more than Robbie approved. This is Robbie, like, guaranteed you will love this. So definitely pick up this book. It's goddamn homework, right? What were you saying, Brian?
Oh, I was gonna say I was glad to hear that the stickers are coming too, because I can't show it off because it's on the back of this laptop. But that Winged Monkey Squadron sticker was really dope.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
And here's what some of the patches look like for
Scouts.
Pretty close.
So imagine 14 of those. I believe that the next one coming out is the Explosives merit badge, is what somebody told me. I think for the trade paperback. But yeah, there are 7 that I have no idea when they're being released, if they're being released, but they exist. I have them, so you can have them too.
You can have them as well.
And also, I did want to point out how thick the paper stock is. It's a solid comic book.
It's a hefty book. I should add, just like our first issue, the OZ #2 is double sized. It's clocking in at 44 pages at a heavier print stock. And because we hit our goal so fast, we will be doing similar enhancements that we did for our first cover. So we'll probably be doing some spot gloss on the Ruben Rojas main cover, as well as adding in some really cool pinups and extra art for this book. So it's a hefty
awesome.
little baby. Somebody had mentioned like, oh, the international shipping costs, like, those are very expensive. We apologize for that. That is out of our hands, but it's in part because this book is double sized and at heavier paper quality. So it weighs probably like triple what like a normal sized book in the direct market would weigh. And that does have a snowball effect when it comes to shipping. But we think it's worth it because we want to make sure that readers truly get enough bang for their buck.
We have gotten a lot of complaints from the community about the comic book industry, about paper quality, especially from the big two. This is way better paper quality than anything you're going to get from the big two. Even if they do their like cardstock prestige, like this is what comics should be, yo. And you really did not spare any fucking expense.
Yeah. We really wanted to make sure that like,
I love that page.
That people just, that they got a really weighty comic. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love reading digitally, I think from my time in comics journalism like that, I had to do it that way. But there's something, you can't replace about having just a thick book in your hands, and the OZ, like it's got some heft to it. I mean, if you needed to roll it up and use it as a defensive weapon, you probably could. It's just, we wanted it to be sort of the almost the luxury experience, for our readers, and just to make sure that they knew this is not an ordinary comic. This is one that exists thanks to the vocal passion and dedication of our readers. And we want them to remember that every time they pick the book up.
It's like when you get a really nice Blu-ray with a slip. That's what it's like. That's what it's like.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
I do have one question on a lingering mystery for me from rereading it is, did Timon and Pumbaa make it through that stampede?
That's funny. Ruben added that in there. I was cracking up. I love working with Ruben because he adds like all these fun little Easter eggs in the mix, and he reminds me a lot of Jorge Santiago Jr., my co-creator on Spencer and Locke. He used to do a lot of the same thing, and seeing that in there, I saw it and I just like burst out laughing when I saw it. And the thing is that I didn't even notice it until the colors came in, and then I saw it and I was like, oh my God, Ruben. No, I love working with Ruben. He's got such a terrific sense of humor, and just, the book wouldn't work if he didn't get what I was trying to do with it.
Yeah.
And he gets it, and he's just a true talent, and I'm so thrilled and grateful to work with him.
Yeah, I think I noticed it because in the writer's commentary, you were talking about how he drew all these different animals, which is difficult, and you were pointing that out. And so I was looking at all the ones and I went, whoa, that's Timon and Pumbaa. Right on there.
But no, it's fun to see what Ruben, has been up to. And I think honestly as he has gotten more comfortable with the characters, his pages are looking even better and better, with every new page that he turns in. And now that he really kind of, he gets these characters, I think, in a really profound way. It's just, I wish people could see the pages as they're coming in. It's really next level stuff. And pairing him with Whitney Kogar, I mean, they are truly a dream team. Ruben knows his best angles and Whitney knows Ruben's best shades, and putting them together, that's worth the price of admission to me.
Yeah. Her colors, I don't know how to describe it, because they're just so spot on how the mood, with tracking the mood.
Yeah.
I wish I had a more descriptive way to put it, because the mood shifts pretty rapidly in certain ways, right?
Yeah.
And it's always striking when it does, the colors that she's using and everything. It's great.
Yeah, no, Whitney's doing just some really just terrific work on this whole book. And I tell her every chance I get, like, this is not going to be the last book we work on together. So I'm always like, whatever it takes to keep you happy, whatever it takes to make sure that you are feeling appreciated. We want to make sure that that's how you feel, because she's our secret weapon. And you hit it on the head. She really hits the mood and tone of every scene. We talked a lot about sort of what's the Mad Max version of Star Wars look like, because you've got sort of the gritty, sort of tension of a post-apocalyptic world. But, Star Wars, you can tell just from a glance at the setting, there's a huge difference between like Tatooine and Hoth and Endor and Coruscant. And, every single setting has its own unique temperature and vibe and dangers and internal high concept. And that's something we're doing a lot in the OZ. It's awesome. You're able to fit in all these different flavors of territory in the occupied zone. And Whitney is sort of putting in a new shade for every single one of them. And it really makes every setting really stand out and really sort of really sort of burrow itself into your brain.
Yeah. You made the Star Wars comparisons last year as well. So I want to know, what's your favorite Star Wars film?
Boy, that is a tough call. I mean, it surprisingly for me, because look, like I understand that Empire is the most emotionally complex out of it. But at the same time, like there's a part of me that's like a real purist where I'm kind of like, but none of that would work without the first one. The first one is like a really strong standalone story. And I also really dig Force Awakens as well. I feel like that was a really interesting setup. I think sort of the internal tug of war about like whether or not they were going to commit to like any sort of changes after that movie. Like,
you said that in the best way possible. You're like, I thought it was an interesting setup.
Yeah, I liked meeting, Finn and Rey and Poe, and Kylo and I thought they were, interesting successors to the original. And I think there was some stuff lost in translation with the rest of that trilogy.
Well, what did you think about the end of it? What did you think about the whole end of that whole sequel trilogy? What did you think about that?
Oh, I mean, part of my brain is just like, there was one movie in that trilogy. I wish there was a more concrete plan, and I totally understand that, like, the third leg of that journey had a lot of cooks in that kitchen and a lot of things that got changed sort of at the last minute.
Yeah.
And so, there's only so much you can do, and I think it goes to show that, like, planning these sort of long-term cinematic universes it's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot harder than it looks. Kevin Feige makes it look easy, and I think it is just decidedly not. But I also think, Star Wars is a very complicated universe. Even compared to Marvel. Marvel, you've got, 70 years of continuity you can mine from and all these different characters. Whereas Star Wars, you're really kind of all drawing from the same three movies. I mean, you've got the expanded universe, but you're still drawing, from like the head of a pin, so to speak. And so it's complicated. I mean, the Star Wars mythology, I enjoy it for what it is, but like, look, if somebody asked me to write something for Star Wars, I would never say no. But like, I think if I was writing like a short or something, I'm not quite sure where I'd begin.
Yeah.
Because
I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be like, let me do something with the Skywalkers. Like there's way more to that universe than that, right?
Yeah. Well, but there's so much in the universe, and honestly, you never know. Like, I don't know what's like considered continuity anymore. Yeah. And what isn't. And
I've seen arguments in my shop of like people being like, that's not canon. And I'm like, whoa, let's calm down, everybody.
It's tough. It can be. It's sort of a microcosm, I think, of the comics industry in general. It can be a little inaccessible. And so. I love the original trilogy. I remember they did the re-releases in theaters, and I was a good ripe age for that. I think I was, 10, 11. And so I was really, I love those re-releases, and they have an important place in my heart. I will say, even though, I mean, there is some stuff that's weird about Jedi, like Return of the Jedi, watching Luke like show up at Jabba's palace and like wrecking everybody, that's dope. Like as a kid, I was like, oh, Luke is not playing around anymore. That's awesome. So yeah, I don't know. I love the original trilogy, and then there are bits of the other trilogies that I enjoy. But I think if I made it like a really deep part of my identity, I would be like truly unhappy. So I just I love it. I enjoy it. I appreciate it from afar.
I keep Star Wars at an arm's distance. I can allow myself to get upset about a Star Trek show, but not Star Wars.
It's not it's not Marvel or DC, where like, if any of those companies are in a slump, it like genuinely hurts my soul. Yeah. Whereas Star Wars, I'm like, well, at least I have the original trilogy.
Star Wars gave me, what they were trying to do with that, right? And like, they have success with things like The Mandalorian. There are elements of those movies that I think are great. I think Last Jedi is the most beautiful looking Star Wars movie we've ever gotten. And, but like, it's almost like I get the same vibes from Marvel and DC sometimes, where it's almost like they don't even know what their core audience wants. So how do they even try to appeal it to new people when they can't identify what made it work in the first place? It's so weird.
Yeah, it's a challenge. And I think it is a challenge as well. Because Star Wars, there's that original trilogy, and that's a postage stamp to try to land on,
Yeah.
And whereas, Marvel, at least you can say there's such a wide spectrum of source material that, it's easier to, I think, take some creative liberties in a way that people aren't going to cry foul. Like Shang-Chi, for example, coming out where, in the comics, his background is, problematic, at best. Fu Manchu is absolutely like a racist stereotype to have as his father. And, so they're grafting on the Mandarin mythology. And
do you like how they thought that the Mandarin was maybe a too racist of an idea for Iron Man, but it's fine for Shang-Chi? It's a little weird.
I think they're fine. They're trying. We'll see how they succeed.
We'll see. I'm just pumped to see some rings, right?
Exactly.
That's the one thing that bothers me is I'm like, Shang-Chi is like Bruce Lee. He's like a weapon in and of himself.
Yeah.
Why am I seeing him fighting with these like rings? Maybe that's the point of the movie is that he realizes I don't need these. I am the weapon, right?
I wouldn't be surprised if that was exactly the arc. But yeah, it's you're able to take liberties with Shang-Chi that like, of course, like, nobody's being like, oh man, you have to be a purist to the original Shang-Chi stories, because like they're not that iconic. There's more runway to have the character evolve and grow and reintroduce them in a modern context. Whereas Star Wars, that's still in the popular consciousness. The 70s were collectively speaking, not that far away. And it was the blockbuster. And so I understand it's, generations of viewers have a very set opinion on what makes Star Wars. And it makes it harder to recontextualize that. I think that's why I enjoyed The Force Awakens so much, is because it felt like a stab at doing so. It's also the reason why I love Jonathan Hickman's X-Men so much. I saw the news about him with Inferno this week, and I'm sort of half in denial, half kind of putting my fingers in my ears, hoping that he at least wrote extensive notes, or might be sticking around in an advisory capacity, because
or that they listened to those notes, right?
Yeah, because I admire people taking big swings and really recontextualizing stuff. That's also the reason why, and purists will hate me on this regard, why I love the J.J. Abrams Star Trek so much is because the Captain Kirk era I never grew up with that, so I have no emotional attachment to it. So the idea of trying to recontextualize that in a way that could bring new viewers like me in, and it's very, it's driven by archetypes and emotion. I love that movie. It's probably one of my top 5 favorite movies. Just because, like,
it's a great movie, dude. I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and that's a great movie, man.
It opened the door to a new fandom for me that I mean, I love Next Generation. I saw that as the Chris Claremont version of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Joe Corral.
look at old Joe.
Joe. Yeah, it's just, it opened the door for me to appreciate Captain Kirk and Spock in a way that I hadn't been raised with. And so I love it when these franchises take big swings to really kind of reinvent everything, because you still have the original trilogy. You still have the original Shang-Chi stories. But you have the Claremont.
Yeah, if only Marvel would keep them in print.
It's you have all those, and let's try something new, and sort of a big deliberate swing. That is something I really admire, and you see it in a lot of Grant Morrison's work. From JLA to New X-Men. And Hickman's run on X-Men is the same thing for me. There's a reason why that book, it really got me through the pandemic. And so, my hat's off to the entire X-Men office for putting out some really superlative work.
On the idea of Star Trek, I do like the Abrams bit. The treatment of Spock was a little weird. They're going to make Spock involved in a romantic story, and sure, whatever, right? And then with the X-Men stuff, I'm right there with you. Like, I'm not in denial because I've been preparing for this, right?
Yeah.
But I was just like, it sucks so much that this guy came in. I remember you were saying, like, if Marvel ever called me and wanted me to do Spider-Man, it would be a definitive beginning, middle, and end, right? And Hickman had that idea. And we're getting the impression now that like everybody was like, no, we're just happy with Act 1.
We're happy with the beginning.
Let's just live in that, right? And I feel like, damn, we're really robbed of some vision. Like, I think of Hickman's Fantastic Four. I think of his Avengers. And some people think his Avengers run ran a little bit too long or whatnot. But those were amazing runs. And you look at some of the best runs or the runs that we personally remember from comic books, the big two, they all had like a run. And like, I feel like Hickman's run was just like, is Hickman just going to be the guy now that comes in and kickstarts, like jumpstarts something new and then just leaves and jumps? Or like, is that what Marvel's going to pay him to do? Like there's so much more to it than that.
I wish I could say, I know just as much as you do as far as that goes. But I admire what Hickman's done. I think that's the only thing I can really say is that, seeing him and seeing Al Ewing, those are the kinds of writers I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
They're just brilliant. Grow up. They're brilliant writers and, are able to sort of dig into continuity and, really kind of infuse it with some big, bold ideas. And especially in the case of Ewing, he's able to really also draw a deep well of emotion into all this. And it's something I find really admirable. It's an admirable quality in a writer. And it's something that, I can only kind of hope to aspire for in my own work. It's just, I'm not smart enough to take a swing as big as Hickman's. I'm not as well read. I'm not, I don't think that big yet because I'm still in my way, still kind of learning the process. I'm still kind of honing my own process a bit.
Well, the rest of us have completely figured out how to fix Marvel and DC, just so you know. The rest of us have totally figured it out.
Lots of videos you can go back and look and see how it can work, right?
Well, it's a challenge, and I think over the last year, I'm sure it's become even more challenging. We're still kind of gearing up with the pandemic in a society that like has not quite caught up to speed. The vaccination percentages being like alarmingly low and the Delta variant kind of creeping up on everybody. And, we'll see what convention schedules look like, in the next few months. They just sent an email to all the creators for Emerald City and C2E2 saying like, we haven't, we're not ready to give everybody their table numbers yet. And so I think they're probably waiting another week and a half to sort of see like, how are these numbers going to turn out? Are we still going to do the show? If New York, I don't know if New York's going to happen. I mean, they already canceled the New York Auto Show happening this month. What's going to happen in October? I'm going to Rose City probably, as long as the numbers cooperate. But, I really the thing that I hope the most is that we don't have another shutdown, because I feel like that would be like calamitous, I think, to our entire industry.
Yeah, for sure. Lee D is in the house with the super chat. Thank you so much, Lee. We do appreciate it. To wrap up the X-Men conversation real quick, when they do introduce the mutants into the MCU, right?
Oh yeah.
And you know how they love to pull things that are a little bit more modern,
Sure.
when they throw things in, they fold it in and whatnot. Would you want them to go full on into the Krakoan era? And like they've been on this island, or do you want like Claremont shit? Do you want like the Kirby Lee stuff? What do you want?
I would love to find a way to kind of bridge the gap a little bit. I think probably the best way to do that, real talk, Jason Aaron's Wolverine in the X-Men era. I think there's a way to kind of graft on like Charles Xavier's school onto actual Krakoa. And it's not just like a normal school anymore where, you're sort of they're hiding from everybody, but this is like a genuinely weird school, and sort of everybody in town's a little weirded out by it, but they're like, look, the mutants seem to keep to themselves, Dark Phoenix again. I don't know.
Get the same guy to try to do it again, right? What was his name?
But that's it. I couldn't tell you Marvel Studios' plans, and they're certainly a lot smarter than I am. But I was reading today.
That's giving them a lot of credit, David. Come on, man.
Kevin Feige, I think, was saying that they've penciled in a date for Deadpool 3, and like Ryan Reynolds is working on the script. So I don't know what their continuity plans are. I don't know if there's a way that they think they can sort of fit in the X-Men via the multiverse theory, where they just poured over the Fox, X-Men just directly into the MCU, which, I mean, that's a choice. They could do it, versus sort of having to run counter to what everyone already knows about like a 20-year franchise. And not one, I don't think I'm talking out of school, that like, the Sony Spider-Man movies, they were hit and miss. And so it's a little easier to be like, we're just going to start from scratch and like introduce a brand new Peter Parker. But those X-Men movies, between X-Men 2, Days of Future Past, and Logan, there's a lot in there that people really like and is very iconic. And I don't know. Will Marvel sort of start from scratch and try to roll the dice with a brand new Wolverine that is not Hugh Jackman? I don't know. But I'm very excited to find out. I'm just curious when that'll be. I know there's really, every time it's brought up, I believe Kevin Feige's like, it's a long way away. And I think the pandemic, especially having almost a full year with no Marvel movies, it's really reinforced. It is a long way away. And so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, we'll see. That's a good answer. I really like that. Joe just wants something all new and all different. So that's super cool. So
I'm excited.
Are you caught up on Loki and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And What If is so good. I don't know if you saw this week's episode.
I haven't seen the newest one yet. No,
I haven't seen the newest one.
I'm not ready for it, dude. I feel like I'm gonna bawl.
It is. I knew I was going to be a mark for What If. I love alternate universe stories. I'm a sucker for them every time. And I love the Captain Carter episode. And without giving too much away, this was my favorite portrayal of T'Challa in anything MCU related. I think it really kind of established him as sort of a utopian optimist in a lot of ways. If you like Grant Morrison's take on Superman, I think you're really going to like this new episode of What If.
I love Grant Morrison's take on Superman. So
yeah.
I feel like I'm going to
really
cry even harder.
Let me say, I saw it. I watched it once in the morning, and then I loved it so much that I was like, I asked my girlfriend, I was like, I think you really like this. Like, we should watch it. And she was a little lukewarm in the Captain Carter episode, and she was like, I really enjoyed this T'Challa Star-Lord episode. So definitely check it out.
So you're that guy that wakes up first thing in the morning, goes to Disney Plus and watches it.
Well,
and then
the thing is, especially since the pandemic has started, I think I've had to embrace what a weird job I have as a writer. Because I had office jobs my whole life. And I think I've been sort of trying to put an office job mentality onto this job that is very unlike any office job I've ever had. And so I'm realizing that like you could either sort of fight to like, you know, to say I'm doing 9 to 5, or you sort of lean into how weird this job is. And so you wake up and you're kind of getting, you know, you're waking up, you're getting your coffee in. And so what I've been tending to do now is, rather than try to force myself to write first thing in the morning when I'm half asleep and not feeling well, I usually sort of take a little bit to wake up. You know, I have my coffee and I watch something just to sort of, you know, wake myself up and sort of get the gears moving a little bit and start to analyze stuff. You know, I have an office now. And so, you know, sometimes I will just sort of walk up there, and even if I feel like crap, you know, I will feel like crap in my office, and slowly but surely kind of get the gears turning. And that has actually wound up being a really effective way of getting my workout. And so, yeah, but realizing like, oh, you know, watching something, if it's for inspiration, is not a bad thing, and you're allowed to do that. And if anything, that is part of the job. Is just like, you know, if you're a bodybuilder, you need to eat and sleep and recover. You need to
Everybody has to do that, David, not just bodybuilders. Okay.
yeah. But you know, it's just knowing that, like, you know, the just sort of consuming of pop culture and analyzing it is just as much a part of the job as sort of synthesizing that into my own voice.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I wake up every morning, and for the first like 30, 40 minutes, I watch Get Up on Sports Center with Mike Greenberg, Greeny. And it just gets me ready and primed to be very critical all day long.
Yeah.
So I'm just ready for it.
Yeah. And so that's, it took me a little while, because obviously, like in an office job, you know, you can't just like watch a movie to like get your brain right. But I'm like, oh yeah, no, that is the job. And especially, you know, if I'm watching a bunch of movies to try to get into the right mindset of the genre I'm working in, it's really incumbent upon me to watch and take notes on everything early. And so, yeah, it's something I've had to really unlearn over the last year. But it's definitely made my work a lot more pleasant to do.
Nice. I'm glad you found that. That's super cool. I want to ask you what you think about all the Substacks nonsense that we've been hearing about.
Sure.
Obviously, that's a big deal, right?
Big deal. You know, it's interesting because running a Kickstarter in the middle of sort of the Substack news, I find myself feeling very fortunate, because the Kickstarter almost feels like the hybrid model between the Substack and the direct market, because you have that online presence, that sort of that easy accessibility that Substack promises. But, you know, there are a lot of people who don't want to read digitally. They want that physical artifact. And so we're able to offer that in a way that is more streamlined than the direct market pre-order system.
Yeah.
I feel like Substack and Kickstarter are an interesting comparison, because Substack, you know, they expect you to have your following already. That's why they're paying them the big bucks, is because these are creators who have worked on major properties for a long time. And so they have a dedicated following coming with them. You know, I'm not deluded enough to think that like I have a following that's like Scott Snyder or James Tynan or Jonathan Hickman or Molly Ostertag, you know, or Donny Cates for that matter. Kickstarter, you're able to really, I think, organically build that readership, you know, and in my case, sort of the work I'm doing in the direct market and the work that I'm doing in Kickstarter, trying to introduce these two somewhat different readerships, trying to bring them to the same table. You know, as far as the actual Substack and like, you know, how do I feel about like how it is? I mean, there are the concerns first off of just the platform itself. You know, I mean, they are platforming some kind of unsavory people, which that would certainly give me some concern. I mean, I recognize that they're offering though some paychecks, which if some of the rumors are true, are astronomically higher than anything you would get in the direct market.
Yeah. I don't blame some people if they took that, right? You know?
But I think logistically is the thing that I'm interested the most in is, you know, these are direct market creators for the most part, who are going to have to deliver content at a webcomics pace. and that's tough. I mean, I don't think I'm talking out of school when like you see all the time at a place like Image where people will announce a new book and then it, a few issues in suddenly like vanishes. I remember Non-Player #2.
Oh man, that book was hot.
That book was hot, and we got.
Or what about if you had like a big, like successful book that went like 54 issues, and you took like a 3-year break? Like,
yeah. Or you do 2 miniseries and you wait a couple years for the 3rd volume. I wouldn't know anything about that. At least we ended.
I just want you to know we're over an hour in, and I haven't even asked about Spencer and
Locke 3. We're working on it. Between like the OZ and Scouts Honor and a very big swing that hopefully I'll be able to talk about later this year or early next year, you'll see. Oh, I get what he was doing. Okay. And a few other books that I've written that we're sort of working on.
I think we know what David's working on.
Yeah, I wish. Oh boy, that'd be amazing. Anyway, I think first off, the big thing is, the Substack deal changes in a year, as I understand it. It's like something is contingent on the first year. And so this may just be an experiment for a year, who knows what's going to happen a year from now. I know that some of these books are going to be, I think everybody's counting on them being printed. And so I'm sure places like Image and Boom and Dark Horse are all kind of vying for print status on a lot of these books. I think it's going to be a while before they come out. I'm just curious, kind of, is the audience going to stick around? And so I think there are a couple creators doing some interesting things. Scott, with his comics writing class, that's something that you don't, you can write a syllabus a lot faster than you can writing producing a comic. And James Tynan, not only is he doing his comics, but he's doing like his column on what was it like to write a Batman book, and that, I think, for me as a creator, I think is very interesting, because as somebody who does want to work in the major leagues, as James has, it would be good to know what's that environment like, really kind of demystify it. I mean, it's a tell-all in a way that we've never really seen. Yeah. We've seen little fragments of it, but James is going like full bore into it. So, it's I don't know what it's going to look like in a year. I mean, I think it's going to depend on how these books look and how they are releasing them. Yeah. I mean, doing it via email, I mean, maybe it'll just be a link to a PDF. I don't know. Nobody's put out a comic yet, so I can't say what the delivery mechanism is going to look like.
I guess Tynan's going to be the first one, right? With that blue book or whatever with Michael Oeming.
Yeah.
But the thing that concerns me is like, and I get it, like a lot, like Tynan, I don't know if Cates did, probably though, but like Tynan and a few others, Zdarsky, Hickman, they got that grant, right? So they're like, basically they were like, this is, and I've heard some rumors of some numbers, right? And they're like, man, this is some money that's going to like fuel me for a while. So I'm cool with it. Right. But what happens? Like I've been through this Hickman rodeo before. What happens when a month goes by and you don't get shit, and how I'm concerned about how does somebody like Donny Cates, James Tynan, they're like the kings right now, it seems, at the big two, right? At Marvel, it's Donny, and at DC, it's James, right? They're doing phenomenal work. But how do you grow that audience? Because it feels like your initial wave of subscribers is those people that are willing to pay. You're going to lose some of those over the few months. But how do you grow that? Like, it's so weird because comic creators already, y'all have to do so much of your own self-promotion and marketing. Like, how do you grow that? That's crazy to me.
Yeah. I wish I had a good answer for that. I mean, I think ultimately, I think comics as an industry, both as readers and as creators, I think we're conditioned to see things through a binary lens, Marvel versus DC, licensed versus creator owned, the direct market versus Substack in this case. And I think or is not the right word here. It's always inevitably going to be and so, I don't know what the, sort of the lag in print versus releasing it on Substack is going to be. I don't know. I mean, if any of these creators think that they're not going to do direct market stuff on top of their Substack, I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. I do think, though, and I think that might be a way that they continue to grow, or maybe have a churn in their work, is that, if James Tynan, for example, is putting out the Department of Truth, which is, a terrific book, on the one hand, there's the chance that somebody might say, well, I don't want to pay $7 a month for Blue Book because I love James Tynan's work enough that I'll just get Department of Truth. On the other hand, if he puts an ad for his Substack in every issue of Department of Truth, and he does it in every issue of Something is Killing the Children, which I don't think would be too hard to do, suddenly the people who aren't on Twitter, might say, oh, well, Substack, like, oh, there's a new James Tynan book that you can get exclusively, for $7 a month on Substack, and however many other projects he has working on, because I'm sure that Blue Book is not the only thing he's got coming. That might be a way for him to keep building that audience. So I think there's going to be a symbiosis with these creators' direct market fare and what they're doing on Substack. I think there are valid concerns of, like, are they going to be able to kind of hit their deadlines with that? But if anybody could, in theory, it would be people with as much experience as James and Jonathan and Donnie. So I don't know. I do think that the creators that I will have the most faith in are the ones who are going to diversify. Seeing like what Scott's doing with his teaching, and James is doing sort of with his sort of industry insider column. But who knows? It is so very early on in the process, and who knows how long they've been building a war chest of material. I would have to think that James has been working on Blue Book, for example, for a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
And so, whether it was for Substack or just independently, and so yeah, I'm going to hopefully have faith in the ability to deliver. And I'm going to have faith that hopefully they will be able to reckon with Substack as a greater platform, and some of the voices that they're choosing to platform. I think that is going to be the moral quandary of this whole initiative in a way that Kickstarter doesn't really deal with, But I wish all of them well, and I hope that they are able to, at minimum, kind of break down some doors for other creators, particularly in the sense of not divorcing digital and crowdfunded work from the direct market. I think that is something that even up to a couple of years ago had a real deep stigma to it. And you see people like Charlie Stickney, or even the creative team of Black over at Black Mask Studios, where, these are books that had enormous success through crowdfunding. Even Heathen over at Vault, got its start as a crowdfunded book. And, I think publishers, it's going to be incumbent upon them to realize that these books, they can have a second life in the direct market. The overlap is not that massive. And, that way it's more financially equitable for the creators. It means that the books, in theory, are going to be mostly done. So there's going to be less chances of delay on the part of the publisher. I think that's a win-win, and I really hope that what James and Scott especially, doing with his deal at Comixology, I hope that's something that publishers are going to start to learn. Like, it's okay that, like, you're not giving up the golden goose by picking up a book that's already been Kickstarted.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, do you have any thoughts on the Substack stuff?
Yeah, well, talked about James Tynan and Scott Snyder adding some stuff. I did briefly look at the Hickman one because huge Hickman fan, but
yeah,
and he is he's bringing in like Rom V and some other people to flesh out different things. But you already kind of mentioned it. I'm a little leery of it just because Black Monday Murders hasn't finished. It is only $8 a month, but it's still $8 a month. And kind of comes with some expectations. So I don't know. It seems a little out there for me.
Well, that's what I like about Kickstarter, is that, like, if you go on and pledge for the OZ #2, you're going to get that book. It's not like you're paying every month to hope you get something. Like, I'm telling you, the first month that we don't get something from Hickman, because, I mean, I'll be honest, like, I'm excited for 3 Worlds, 3 Moons, Teeny Howard, Ron V, and Al Ewing, and Mike Del Mundo, and Mike Huddleston. I'm excited for that. But, like, I would rather have the next issue, Black Monday Murders, or Dying in the Dead. You know what I'm saying? So at least with Kickstarter, we know what we're getting.
Right. No, I mean, and I think like all these platforms, there's going to be a learning curve to it for sure. And I think the question is just going to be, you know, what is Substack willing to do in year 2? I think that's going to be kind of the big question. And, you know, I will say, you know, having Nick Spencer sort of spearheading it, he's not an idiot, you know, like he's a guy who's been around for a while, and he knows the lay of the land, both in terms of the industry, but also the business side of it. And so I wouldn't be surprised, you know, I really like, I wouldn't be surprised if Nick is watching, you know, sort of how the rollout is going and taking notes and sort of figuring out like, okay, this is what worked for us, and these are some things we're going to have to fine tune. You know, so I'm curious. I mean, we'll see kind of how hard Substack kind of, you know, pulls the leash, so to speak. That sounds probably a little dismissive, and I didn't mean it as such. But, you know, like, will Substack give Nick Spencer the runway to evolve the plan? Or are they going to be very impatient in sort of the search of venture capital, that they're like, we have to have instant results in the first year, and we have to do this right the first time? I don't know. I think if it's sort of a one-shot deal, I don't know how that succeeds, because all these platforms need time to evolve and grow and sort of change the plans and lean into the things that work and lean away from the things that don't. You know, Kickstarter, I think, is exactly that. You know, that's a platform that's just been growing and growing over the years. So, but I do think that if there's any creators who I think are positioned to help trailblaze this sort of thing, it's the ones with the following, you know. And so I think between Jonathan and James and Scott and Chip, I always forget that Chip is involved in this, and sorry, Chip, and Donnie, you know, these are the guys that have the reputation that if there are bumps in the road, they are uniquely withstand to weather it. Whereas I think there are other creators who are more up and coming, that if something got messed up either through their end or through Substack in general, they would not be as insulated from the backlash. So, you know, I'm always up for trying new things, especially, you know, over how we've seen the industry evolve just in the last year. Yeah. And so, you know, I'm going to hope for the best. It's not like they're inviting me. So, you know, so it is really just kind of being a spectator on this one and seeing where everything lands.
Well, at least somebody at Substack at least watched the Image Revolution documentary, and they figured out the idea. It was like, let's get the guys responsible for X-Men, Spider-Man, and Batman, and I think we're good. I almost feel like that happened somewhere. But let's move on from the Substack stuff. Last time you were on here, you mentioned a lot about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I never asked you, who's your favorite turtle?
Raphael.
Of course. Everybody says Raphael. Well,
you know, it's funny. I've been told this for a long time, you know, even back to my days at Newsarama, you know, everyone says, who's your favorite turtle? And I immediately say Raphael, and they're like, but you're such a Leonardo. And, you know, it only hurts because it's true. You know, I always kind of take on the burden of responsibility. And I think that's the thing that always appealed to me about Raphael, is like, he's the guy who just like, he is unapologetically himself, and he doesn't have that burden of responsibility. And he's even a little covetous of it, not really realizing what that entails. But, you know, he's the guy who, he's not wearing a mask, you know. Like, I know Michelangelo is impulsive, but Raph is just like, well, Raph is interesting because on the one hand, like he's not wearing, you know, he's not putting on any filters, but there is sort of a facade. You know, he does have that extra bravado to hide from the fact that he is wildly insecure.
You got to know what a crumpet is to play cricket.
Yeah, you know, but yeah, just something about it. I love the intensity. I love just the fact that, like, you know, he's not going to take any crap off of Leo. or anybody for that
Yeah.
matter. And so, yeah, Raph is always been my favorite turtle from the beginning.
Asking that question, David, is almost like pulling a tarot card for you. And what I will tell you is that you may be the Leonardo, but you want to be the Raph. So you need to throw a little bit more edginess. You got to throw a little bit more of that asshole-ish vibe into your life.
Into my work. You know, but I mean, I love the Ninja Turtles, and I feel like, you know, any group of people, you know, you can pretty much break them down on like which turtle you are or which Golden Girl you are, you know, or which member of Sex and the City you are.
I never thought about the Golden Girl bit. That's really true.
It's very true. And so, yeah, but no, I'm a huge fan of the Turtles, and I would love to do something in the Turtles universe. And you know, if IDW is watching, you know, give me a call. I would love to do something in that world. That's a universe, unlike Star Wars, where I'm like, oh, I don't really know which end is up. Like Turtles, I'm like, oh yes, like give me some stuff. And I love Last Ronin. What a fun book. I'm only jealous that I'm not involved in it. But yeah, like I would.
The only thing that bothers me about Last Ronin, David, is that, like, for instance, this happened today. Someone came in and was like, when's the next issue of Last Ronin coming out? And I'm like,
yeah. You
tell me, bro.
Yeah, that I don't know. But yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
That's a fun book though, man. That makes Michelangelo such a more like tragic character, man. What a great book, man.
Yeah, you know, the baby brother and the party dude getting all the responsibility thrown on him. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Very, very fun series, and I'm excited to see where it winds up. But
who's your favorite TMNT villain?
Boy, that's a good question.
I know, that's even better than who's your favorite turtle, because everybody thinks about that one.
Yeah, I mean, boy, because there's so many cool visuals that because I love the design for Baxter Stockman, the fly version of him, and Shredder. Something about Shredder, just he steals the scenes. You know, I mean, it's very much like a Darth Vader kind of vibe to him.
Oh yeah.
And this is just me being 90s trash, but like Tokar and Razor.
I was gonna be like, yeah, don't sleep on Token and Razor, bro.
I mean, it's those I think are my favorites. I think when you start, I watched the cartoons before I read the comics, and so like once you get into like all of the Krangs, it loses me a tiny bit. Or when you start like bouncing around to like Cerebrus's world and stuff like that. But yeah, like, put him in the city, having fighting like other mutants, like, any sort of TCRI, conspiracies going on like that, then you got me. I think keeping the Turtles in the city and just and having weird stuff like kind of constantly assaulting them. I think there's a lot in common with old school Spawn.
Okay.
With those adventures. I was doing a reread of Spawn the other week. And I was just like floored at how like, maybe this is again, young me, not being able to separate, but I was just like, it felt really organic. Just like, seeing all of like, Al dealing with like the conspiracies of heaven and hell, but it like is all sort of populated just in the Bowery. And, at one point, murdering Billy Kincaid and like, I'm like, oh, but like this feels organic, and that one character could just kind of keep, running into all this, and that's something that I think can be a challenge for a lot of ongoing series. Is how do you? That's a very funny joke.
I think so. It cracked me up when you read that.
But yeah, I admire whenever a long running series can introduce that many villains in a way that's organic to the setting and is not going to force them to go to like all these different locales to find their villains.
All right. So like, let's just say IDW came to me and they're like, Robbie, we want you to put together a new micro series for TMNT villains, and you get to put it together. Now, the first thing I would do is I would get Joe Corallo to do a Saban issue, right? But then I would call you. What villain would you do? Would I dude? If you want to do Token Razor, that's fine. By the way, I'm doing Super Shredder, so nobody can touch that, right? But like, what would you do?
I don't know. If I only had one shot to do Turtles, I mean, I think you'd have to do Shredder. You know, like I think he's so iconic, and you can still cheat by having like Baxter Stockman is like his hostage / assistant.
Yeah.
And then, at the end of the story, he falls in the mutagen and turns into a fly or whatever. But just something about Shredder. I it's funny reading the recent Turtles Power Rangers crossover really like reignited my love of the Shredder. Nice. Just just as a character who, he's just a badass, and like, just having a character, this is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is like, when you have a team book like that, you have to have a strong villain, somebody who is like capable of like beating up an entire ensemble, Yeah. That's why Magneto works so well in the context of the X-Men. You have a villain that's so defined and so powerful that it's very believable that he could take on like 12 X-Men at once, Yeah. And I think Shredder is very much in that same vein, where like he's the guy who like, they're Ninja Turtles, but they're teenage Ninja Turtles. They're not going to know everything there is to know, whereas like Shredder is like an encyclopedia of violence. And he's turned himself into a living weapon. And this is my own personal headcanon. I mean, I know that's not the way that the books, the everything would represent it. I like the idea of his armor being like in reaction to the Turtles, that like he is instinctively threatened by the Turtles in sort of a Lex Luthor Superman kind of way, because he's like, just their raw power, they're already inhumanly strong and fast and durable, and they're just kids. What happens when they like really reach their full potential? And so this is his way of sort of like flexing back, that he's like, oh, well, I've got this armor that turns me into a living weapon, and you guys might be like mutagenically enhanced, but I can still beat the crap out of all of you.
Yeah.
So there's something really cool about the Shredder that I really dig. And I think it is long past time to do a cool story, kind of redeeming the Shredder a little bit, or not redeeming, but giving him a little more context. Cause I think if there's any one, I'm not going to say flaw, but one trend in his characterization is he's usually kind of a villain, just kind of the straight up villain,
just twirling his mustache.
Yeah. Right? And I would love, real talk, I would love the idea. I mean, you'd have to do like a reboot because it wouldn't fit in continuity, but I love the idea of like Shredder being like, it's almost like The Departed, but for Krangs, where like he's the guy who like, has to like double cross the Krangs to make sure that they don't like completely invade our world. And so like he keeps sicking them on the Turtles, like trying to buy himself more time to like figure out how to get them out.
I like that. I also like that I don't feel alone anymore in thinking that the idea of multiple Krangs, like it doesn't help the idea. Like Krang's amazing in the cartoon.
Yes.
Right.
But having one of him is what makes him so special, and having a bunch of them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's diminishing returns. Because I love Krang, and I think like Krang by himself is like can be a really kind of scary threat, but a whole bunch of them, then you're just like, oh well, they're just like stomach brains.
Yeah, they're just stomach brains. That's really good. First of all, I would get Brian teamed up with Ramvi, teamed up with Jorge Jimenez to do the Krangs story, which is called Stomach Brains. I would get I would get you and Bill Sienkiewicz teamed up to do a Baxter Stockman story.
That'd be dope.
I would do the Super Shredder story, but I would have you co-plot and script it with me.
Oh, thank you.
With Dan Mora. after what I've heard from you about Shredder. Let's get Dan more on that. Let's do that.
Yeah,
and
I
would get Joe to do Haim Sabam, but he would have to draw it himself. So there you go.
And also, another Turtles character who I think doesn't get enough love is Casey Jones. I love Casey Jones, and I think he would be like a really interesting character. Hey, Bearded Comic Bro, how you doing, buddy?
Bearded.
I love Casey Jones a lot. I think he's a really interesting character. We took some inspiration from him just in Spencer and Locke with Locke's game of Convict Ball. He would be another fun character who I think he never gets enough love. And I think there's more to Casey than just being a foil for Raph or a foil for April. And so that would be an interesting thing to dig into.
I agree. Brian, any thoughts?
And you guys are way more steeped in the Turtles than I am. When you said favorite villain, I was like,
your eyes are just glazing over. You're like, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, I gave Robbie a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles poster for your birthday.
I'm pumped. They're over there. He got me a Super Shredder. He got me a Toka and a Vanilla Ice Secret of the Ooze movie poster, bro.
Yeah. So
Vanilla Ice.
Shredder's...
By the way, I would also do the Vanilla Ice bit too. I'd do that one shot for Vanilla Ice, and I would draw it too for myself. Actually, I get Joe to draw it. That's what I would do. Y'all can hear me?
Let's see. Oh, someone's saying best TMNT movie.
Oh, that's easy.
I mean, it's got to be the first one, right?
It's the first one. Yeah.
There can't be any debate about that.
Who said that? What a dumb question. No offense.
No, it's not a dumb question, but I'm like just trying to remember. I'm like, I know part 2, like I loved it as a kid, but that's because I was a child. And coming out of the Shell store, I actually went to that. Okay.
Yeah, you said that last year when you were here. Yeah.
Blew my mind. They went through St. Louis, and it was magical.
Dude, that's how I first learned about Tai Chi. Was Splinter's little ballad that he does.
Yeah, that was super dope. But I distinctly remember even as a kid, I did not like the third one. Even as a kid, I was like, this kind of sucks. And the CGI one was okay. And I've not been a big fan of the new ones.
I didn't even watch those ones, to be honest. So I mean, the animated one's actually pretty good. The TMNT, and I really like Secret of the Ooze because of how old I was at the time. But the first one is, I remember watching the first one. I was like, I think this is the first movie I've ever seen where they say the word "damn." Like that just blew me away when Raph was like,
"Yeah, me too." I love that movie, and it just structurally it feels pretty strong. I'm sure there's a little bit of fat that could have been trimmed, especially about Danny and the underground for small children. But at the same time, that as a kid, that was like a good in, like where I was like, oh, like there are kids in this, like, this is exciting. Danny was sort of the viewer surrogate in a way for the target audience of that movie. So I can't even slag it too much. But you know what? Sam Rockwell in that movie, how awesome was that? So
holy
good for him.
Shit, Sam Rockwell's in that movie.
Sam Rockwell's in that movie.
Oh my God, I'm writing that down. Time for a revisit.
You got to revisit. Yeah, he plays like one of the terrible children in Shredder's child camp, where he's like smoking and.
I remember being a kid and being like, "What a life, man! You just get to
Joe's got jokes.
You just get to skateboard and smoke and play video games. Like that's great. That's all I wanted to do."
Again, as an adult, like the plan doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But as a kid, you're like, "Yeah, that's wish fulfillment. That sounds dope."
Joe just lost me. I don't even know what the Dinkins administration means.
I'm just laughing. I mean, Joe's got jokes tonight. Thank you for joining me on this one.
We can always depend on Joking Joe. Twitch says menthol or regular. It depends. It just depends. I got a question for you.
Dinkins though was the mayor of New York before Giuliani, just so you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay.
Oh,
I
Joe
got you.
just chimed in. But yeah,
He was the
menthol
mayor of
or
New York at
regular?
the time.
Are we talking about cough drops?
I think we're talking about cigarettes. It's from the bit from the movie where he's like,
funny.
"What do you want, menthol or regular?" And he's because they got cigarettes. That's the thing that
That's
you
funny.
did when you were a kid to
I
rebel.
did not remember that line. That's very funny. Okay.
Twitch with the deep cuts tonight.
Yeah.
You have expressed a love for the character of Captain Marvel, Shazam.
Yes.
I want to know, what do you think are the best Shazam stories out there?
Well, boy, it's tough because it's like there are my favorite character, my favorite stories featuring Shazam, but it's not why I love Shazam. I love Shazam in theory, even more than I love him in practice, if that tracks. I know exactly what angle I would take with that character, and I could write Shazam for 10 years and be super happy with it. I think I don't want to talk too out of school. I think there's been an attempt to recontextualize Billy Batson that hasn't necessarily been for me. I think making Billy sort of, have an attitude as a kid, I think it misses the point of why I love Billy Batson so much. There are stories like Crisis Times 5, in JLA. Jeff Parker and Doc Shanner did a really fun Convergence story with him, and I'm pretty sure that Morrison did one as well in Multiversity. Even his darker story in Kingdom Come, which is how I was introduced to the character, I think even that explains what is good about Shazam, which is, he's got the power of Zeus, and he's got the wisdom of Solomon, which is his most important power, but it's all anchored in it's the heart of a genuinely inherently good kid. And one who has really had a bad hand dealt to him. And it doesn't change the fact that he's just a genuinely good-hearted kid. I compare, if I could write Shazam, I think of him a lot as Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender. A kid who is imbued with kind of an awesome power and responsibility, but he's still a kid and he's still learning the ways of the world. And that's what I like the most about the character. What's Billy Batson's first kiss like? What's it like the first time he tries to drive a car? What's it like when he has to accept the reality of death, even as a superhero? It's all these growth moments that we've seen a lot of with Clark Kent in Smallville, but writ large, because Smallville, we always knew how it was going to turn out. We knew that Clark was going to be okay, and would his best days were ahead of him as the Man of Steel. Shazam, we're watching all this play out in real time. Billy has to study and keep a secret identity. But Dr. Savannah is also robbing the bank. Checkmate wants the power of the 7 sins. All this cool stuff. So I'm a huge fan of Shazam, and I'm a huge fan of Billy Batson. He's my favorite DC character. I would do a lot to be able to write Shazam over at DC. I don't know anybody at DC, so I don't know, how soon that's going to happen. But I also know that Billy's got his own, continuity stuff going on right now, with Teen Titans. And I think like his it's sort of like a split personality now, where like his Billy Batson identity, I think, was like guarding the gates of hell. And so there's a lot juggling with him right now. And I think if I ever had my druthers, he's the kind of character who, he can kind of weave in and out of continuity a little bit. If there's something going on, have that get represented. But Billy's adventures can drive a decade's worth of stories, and so that is the thing that I would really love to tackle as a writer. So if anybody from DC is listening, call me up.
Anybody from DC is listening, Get this motherfucker on some Shazam. Seriously, he's gonna love it. It'll be good. I
I'm
love
glad
that you mentioned. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I've always liked the Shazam character, but kind of what you said at the beginning, in theory, because like, I know Joe brought up the Jeff Smith one. That one's good, but like, I don't know if I could answer that question. I don't know what, other than the memorable moments like you mentioned in Kingdom Come and some of these other ones, like it's hard to find kind of like good, solid runs.
For me, especially when it comes to something licensed, I'm always looking. Look, the hardest things that I would imagine to write licensed are the things that I have that lifelong love of. Like if somebody said, "Hey, you want to write Spider-Man?" Like, of course, if somebody offered, I would do it because, like, when are you going to get offered to write Spider-Man? But like, I know my immediate reaction would be like to tense up because, like, I love Spider-Man and I love everything about the character, and there's so many great stories. How do you top that? How do you add to that? You can say the same thing about Batman, but that's why I gravitate towards characters who I see something in them. There's something about them as a concept that I really enjoy, but I don't necessarily have sort of the deep, warm feelings from their stories in the past, if that makes any sense. I don't want to call them fixer-uppers because I don't think that implies that they're already far gone. But I think there are unexplored angles for some of these characters, characters like Shazam, characters like Doctor Strange, that would be really fun to explore. Whereas a character that is bigger and more oversaturated, it's harder to find that angle. It's harder to find that and that new take that really represents your voice. And every so often you see somebody like a Grant Morrison pulling that in a new X-Men, or Hickman pulling it off on House and Powers of X. But as I've said before, those guys are much smarter than me. But I think there are some characters that are underloved right now, and maybe haven't found that big iconic forever run. And those are the ones I'd love to take a shot at. And that's why I want to write Captain Planet so bad. I mean, the cartoons were really ahead of their time, but I love Captain Planet conceptually, and I think there's some really cool stuff that could be built off of that. Going back to the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, I think there's so many cool properties out there that we could introduce to a brand new generation, and a brand new take, and even the people who might have overlooked these characters, reading them back in the day. I think there are so many cool opportunities to take a new angle on all these. And you see it with Tom King, to be honest. I know that his work isn't always for everyone, but I think, seeing like what he did on Mr. Miracle and seeing what he did on The Vision, I admire the swing, I admire the ambition. I might even say I admire the chutzpah, but I think he has been able to sort of recontextualize some of these characters in a way that they've often been ignored or overlooked. And that's the sort of thing that I really want to do if I ever get my shot doing some licensed stuff. It would be trying to take a big swing like that.
I love that you mentioned the Kingdom Come bit, because that's where I first got acknowledged about Shazam. And I was like, this dude just whipped Superman's ass, y'all.
Yeah.
Who is this guy? Have you ever heard of this guy?
Yeah.
There's an old TV show. Let's watch it. Like, it's super cool. It's a great character and lots of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I do think the Jeff Smith run's pretty cool. I think the Jeff Johns stuff is decent. Jeff Loveness had a couple like little fill-in issues here and there, and the new current miniseries is actually not that bad. Like I thought it was actually pretty solid. The idea on that one is like the Rock of Eternity is split apart, so like he can't call on the power and he can't share it with his family. And
whose mini got really overlooked that I really enjoyed, Judd Winnick.
Okay.
And I think Howard Porter did the Trials of Shazam.
The trial, I remember that.
That was a fun one. Definitely got overlooked. But yeah, that's it was.
There was a time at DC where they were like, "What are they doing with Carol Danvers? Crank out some Shazam books." God damn it, we got the first Captain Marvel. Who cares? Hell yeah, great conversation, Brian. Any final thoughts for David tonight before we dip out?
Well, one thing, when I was rereading the Oz one, I saw the Joe Mulvey pinup.
Yeah.
It reminded me that you had a story in this too, the Wailing Blade.
Wailing Blade. Listen, I've me and Joe Mulvey and Rich Duke, we go back a little ways. Mulvey and I have known each other for over a decade. Just on Twitter, he used to write a column giving people who'd never read a comic, giving them some comics and getting their reactions. I thought that was like kind of an interesting market test. It's sort of focus group testing a little bit. And so I always admired that. And then when Joe turned out to be like a stellar artist on top of that, I was like, oh, I love this guy. And so Joe and I, we've worked together. He did our first variant cover for Spencer and Locke. So my very first published cover is a Joe Mulvey cover. That's so awesome. I always try to keep Joe involved whenever I can. We almost got him in for a store variant for Scouts Honor, and some stuff kind of fell through with the store at the last second. I wanted to make sure when we were able to do those pinups that we got Joe in for one of them. A huge fan of Joe's. And when he and Rich invited me to do a prose story for Wailing Blade, I was just over the moon about it. That's my first published prose work. And so I'm super thrilled. I'm super thrilled to see it. Our copies actually got lost in the mail because we moved. So Tyler is sending us some new ones now. I think Joe and Rich are real salt of the earth guys. And so it was my pleasure and my honor to be invited to pitch in for Wailing Blade.
Yeah, that's it's a really cool story. I really dug it. And your description of Joe's art in the writer's commentary, I thought was probably the best way you could describe it. How it's like cartoony, but it still has all these horror elements that
I remember when I showed him. I remember when I showed him the Scarecrow because I was like, "Look, man, hey, we just like blew through our funding in one day, and so I need to add some pinups to this book like yesterday." And I was like, "Joe, I really think you could handle the Scarecrow." Because I had already reached out to Alex Cipriano for his pinup for the Tin Soldier, kind of this like ultra detailed Jeff Darrow, Frank Quitely kind of take on it. And
cool.
Joe, I was like, I think you could do a really killer take on the Scarecrow. And boy, yeah, just seeing the straw man, just all the energy he threw into it. Like he was like, I love this design. There we could do some really cool stuff here. And I want to give a shout out to Jason Smith as well. Jason's colored some of Joe's work, for Spencer and Locke, the covers that he's done. And so I knew that Joe's work would be in good hands with Jason. And so, yeah, it was super fun seeing all that come together. And I love that pinup a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's dope. So.
Hell yeah. All right, everybody. The OZ is kickstarting issue number 2 out of 3 right now.
Yes.
It's already funded. If you support the Kickstarter, you're going to get your book. There's a description in or a link in the description below. And of course, I posted it in the PCP Army. David, thank you so much for being here. Tell us once again about the OZ.
Yeah.
What's coming up? What you got, bro?
Yeah. If you like Mad Max Meets the Wizard of Oz, you're going to love the OZ. If you missed our first campaign, we've got digital and print catch-up tiers to get you up to speed. As well as bundled sets of all of my trade paperbacks. And you'll be able to also add them individually a la carte via backer kit at the end of the campaign if there's any specific trades that you might like. Also, Scouts Honor, the trade paperback for that hits comic shops everywhere September 8th. You can tell your local comic shop to order it with the code JUL211246. That's JUL211246.
Damn, you memorized that. That's awesome.
Anywhere comics are sold, you'll be able to get that. And then, if you want to follow me online, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Pepose D. It's just my last name, first initial. David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews, or visit my website, davidpepose.com.
And coming soon to Substack. Just kidding. I'm on
MailChimp. I don't plan on leaving it anytime soon. No, thank you guys so much for having me and for helping spread the word about the OZ. It means the world. I'm excited that we were able to catch up and not just talk about the Kickstarter, but just talk about fun comic stuff. This is my jam. This is why I get up out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, and it wasn't like there was a week of crazy news to talk about or anything, right? So that was nice.
But no, thank you again for all your support, not just for the OZ, but for all of my work really since the beginning. It really means the world, and we're so thrilled to have you both as Yellow Brick Road Warriors.
Of course. But y'all, you got to read Spencer and Locke. You got to read Going to the Chapel. You got to read Scout's Honor. And you got to get on board with the OZ if you haven't already. Many of the PCP Army that supported it last year got the first issue, loved it. So now it's time to get the story going and get it rolling and check it out. Like I said, link in the description below. Thank you so much. And one more thing about Substack. They approached me. I turned it down. But I just want you to know that Brian sold out and he's going over to Substack and he's taking everything over there. So including the puke colored room or whatever. Anyway, we're just kidding. We really appreciate it, David. I appreciate you for being here, Brian. I appreciate you, PCP Army, for being here.
Are we supposed to close it?
I'm sure that Robbie
you may have hit the wrong button
being on the show.
Sometimes I hit the wrong button. But anyway, we're dipping out. We love y'all. Station, y'all have a good one.
All right.